Good evening. My name is Pieter Smal, and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my first interview, and I am so privileged tonight to have the opportunity to speak to the fabulous Nathan McCree. Welcome, Nathan.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So, if I had an audience, I would like to have like a big round of applause and everyone go crazy, like Oprah Winfrey style. But I think if I was Oprah Winfrey, then you would also have to jump on the couch like Tom Cruise, right?
Yeah.
And by implication, I'd also have to give everyone a car.
Right.
Let's avoid that situation.
Okay.
So, Nathan is known for writing the first three soundtracks of the original Tomb Raider games. So, tell me, Nathan, what instruments do you play?
Piano mostly, a little bit of guitar, drums. Um, yeah, but I'm really trained on the piano.
Oh, really?
That's my
How
bag.
old were you when you first started?
I started when I was 6, but I didn't really like it, so I stopped again and started when I was 11,
Hmm.
and carried on studying the piano till I was 18, and I've
Okay.
just been playing since then.
Oh, obviously,
Yeah,
once you're in like once you're a musician, you can never stop.
yeah, sure.
What first got you into music? Like I remember when I started playing, it was my grandma that got me into music. How did you start for the first time?
Um, Well, I guess my dad sort of introduced me to music from an early age. He was always
Mm,
playing me stuff, not necessarily things which I wanted to listen to. He used to play me a lot of classical music, and then asked me to guess the
mm.
composer. And I never had any clue who it was. He used to try and teach me how to work it out. This went on for years, and then eventually, he got me to join the church choir because he used to sing in that. And then moving on from there, when I got to about 13, I really got into electronic music, really started to, that sort of sparked my interest, synthesizers and all that kind of thing, because that was the sort of new wave thing that was coming out when I was about that
Correct,
age.
correct. Yeah, yeah.
So so I persuaded him to buy me a synthesizer. It was a Korg Delta, an analog keyboard, and it was great. And I borrowed his reel-to-reel quarter-inch tape deck because I could multi-track on it. So I used to start to layer sounds on top of each other, and yeah, I started writing songs when I was 13. So
Fascinating.
that's kind of where I started. Yeah,
Yeah. So, what was some of the first compositions that you remember writing?
I think probably the first track I ever wrote that I called something
Mm.
was a track called City Life,
Ooh.
and I wrote it with a friend of mine who sang on it, and I did all the keyboard parts and the drums.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we wrote another track together, and then I wrote a track with my brother, and then I started hanging out with another mate of mine who was working in a recording studio. So then
Mm.
it got quite serious after that. So probably from about the age of 15, I got my eyes on the sort of professional recording world, and yeah, I was hooked at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah, exactly. The problem is, I think there's this meme going around of uh, don't don't give your children artistic things because don't do drugs, don't give them artistic things because they'll get hooked on music and they'll spend all their money on instruments or on art supplies. And I think what parents often don't understand is once you're hooked into the art and the creativity, it's like what's so difficult to get away from it. So,
Yeah, that's true. But to be a success at anything, you've got to love it. You've got to love what you do.
mm, mm,
If you
mm.
don't love it, you won't be successful at it. You might earn money, but to be really successful, you've got to live and breathe it, and you can only do that if you really fall in love with it.
Exactly, yeah. So, what did you study at university?
I studied software engineering, computer programming. and design. Um, computers was kind of like my second pastime, if you like, apart from music. I got into computer games when I was probably about 11. I think the first home computer we had was a Sinclair ZX81. And me and my brother, well, in fact, I used to do all the programming. My brother used to read the lines from a magazine. This is how loaded your game.
Yeah,
He
I
would read the
remember.
lines, and I would
Yeah.
type it in. And after about an hour of us typing, we'd like press run and see if it worked.
Yeah,
And if we
yeah.
typed it incorrectly, it would work. And if we hadn't, we had to go through the whole thing and find out where the typing error was. I mean,
Yeah.
it was terrible, but we would spend days doing it. So that kind of got me into games, really.
I
And
remember there
so,
were Osborne, I think Osborne publications with also you can make your own game, and I think it was Basic.
yeah, right. Yeah, it was basic. Basic programming language, yeah.
Fascinating, I remember.
Yeah. So that kind of got me into computers, and I did. I started programming my own stuff. In fact, I started programming sound effects when I was about 13, 14. We had a BBC Micro at that time, and so then I actually wanted to leave school at 17, and I wanted to be in a band because I was in a band at that time, and I wanted to just tour the world, being in a doing gigs. That's what I wanted to do. My dad was like, absolutely no way, mate. You're doing your A levels and you're going to university. So
Yeah.
thought, well, if that's what I'm going to do, I didn't want to do music. I was sort of getting a bit bored studying music. All the history and the analytics. Although that was really important, and I'm glad I did that. I just didn't want to carry on doing that. I'd had enough. I just wanted to write, and I felt like I knew enough music to write at that point. So I decided to do computer software engineering instead. So I learned all about computer architecture and programming, and that proved really useful for my career, and it still does to this day, because I'm one of the few people in the industry that is a music composer and sound designer and a computer programmer. So it really helps me now. I mean, because at my level now as audio director, I can talk to all those disciplines, no problem. And I
Yeah,
understand,
yeah.
when I'm asking them the earth or whether I'm asking them just a 5-minute job. And that helps sometimes because, these guys do try and, pull a fast one on you. When you ask them to do something, they're like, oh, that's going to take me a week. I'm like, really? Surely this is just a linked list, isn't it? They're like, yeah, it'll be about 10 minutes. I'm like, I thought so. So, it does help. And of course, being a sound designer, it's not just about creating sounds. It's also about implementation. And the audio engines that we have to work with, they're massive machines, and you really have to know your stuff to get things to work well. So, yeah, it's turned out pretty good for me in the end.
I often hear parents complain about video games, but the way I see it is, especially nowadays, it's the entirety of the game is such a work of art and
Yeah.
complexity, immense complexity. And now we're only talking about the audio side and putting all of that together. I mean, parents and the older generations don't see the actual mathematics and complexity that goes into just putting a game together. And
They're
it's
massive pieces of software. I mean, millions and millions of parts, and big teams now as well. You're talking up to 100 and bigger. When I started in the games industry, we had teams of like 4 people, 6 people, stuff like this. Even Tomb Raider only had 12.
yeah.
It's nothing when you think about it now. People like, Ubisoft and whatever, they have teams of like 200 and 300 people all working on one game. It's like phenomenal. And so
Yes,
the
exactly.
management and the software needed just to manage the software that you're writing, all those systems are just huge.
But that is the reward of working in the industry, or at least having insight of how it works. Is you analyze while you play and listen, and wow, this is so well produced. Wow, what did they do here? Wow, it's not just you're just consuming it, but you're actually analyzing and appreciating it more. So
Yeah.
how did you get into your first job at Core?
So I left university and I was looking for a programming job, like doing spreadsheets for insurance companies or banks. This is the kind of stuff we'd been trained for.
Yeah,
How to analyze user requirements, write pseudocode, and then eventually write the actual, computer programming code that does what they want it to do, right? So I was looking for that sort of job, and I moved away from. I was at university in London, and I moved away to Derby in the Midlands because my girlfriend was there. She was at university, so I thought, well, I'll go and live with her, and I'll just look for a job up there. And of course, I didn't know anybody up there, or hadn't come from Derby, so I didn't know anything about the place. So I got the yellow pages out. I mean, we don't have yellow pages anymore, but it's like a directory of telephone numbers, right?
Correct.
So I got it out and I looked up computer. I can't remember what the subtitle was, but computer software or something like that. And there was a list of about 200 companies, and I just one after one, I wrote to every single one. I'd use a manual typewriter to type each letter, one after the other after the other. I spent weeks doing it. And I got no after no after no. And one of them said, yeah, sure, come for an interview. And that was
You got the you not just got the right job, but the job that set your career.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even know it was a games company. I just turned up to this number on a street, walked in the building, went into reception. Hello, I'm here for a job interview. Yeah, wait here. And I sat down and I started looking around me, and there were all these pictures on the walls of games. I'm like, is it, excuse me, is this a computer games company? And they're like, yeah, that's what we do here. I'm like, no way. Couldn't believe it. I was like, struck it here, mate.
Yeah.
So I went up, I was talking to the boss, and, half an hour later, he was like, yeah, gave me the job.
Fantastic.
But as a programmer.
So
right.
I suppose they needed some music, and
yeah, well,
you randomly messaged.
My first project, as it turned out, because I had a musical background, was to program a music sequencer for the Sega Mega Drive. And it's like we call them like a tracker, a music tracker. It's a bit like a fruit machine. It's got reels, and you can define how many, if you like, fruits are on the reel. And these are the ticks or the quantizes of the bar. So you might say, right, I want 64 ticks or fruits or slots. And the reels spin these 64 ticks around at a certain speed, which you define. And as they spin round, in each slot, you can put a note and some commands about that note. If it's got a vibrato on it or a slur or what the volume is. And you put in all this data, you press start and the reels go round. And each reel is a voice. So you can have, on the Mega Drive, we had up to 6 reels, so that was 6 voices. And this is and each spin of the reel, that's like one pattern. And you can tell each pattern to move to another reel. And you join one pattern after the other, and bit by bit you create a piece of music from it.
I'm
really
so glad we're
clunky,
past. I'm so glad we're past that stage. Technology came a long way.
Yeah, right. And this is like writing music on a QWERTY keyboard. We mapped out C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, on the QWERTY.
Yeah.
And you sort of, and you can set the reels spinning, and you can sort of hit the key at the right time, and it'll punch in a note as that reel spins round. So you can actually sort of play on it real time.
Did you use that system for writing Tomb Raider's first music?
No. Tomb Raider came a bit later, but I wrote some games on this system that I coded. Because after I'd coded it, I said to Jeremy, our boss, I said, look, I'll write some music on it to show you how it works. He was like, all right. So I wrote a tune, it took me a day or something. And then I played it to him, and he was like, oh, that's brilliant. Do you want to do the music for our next game? And I'm like, yeah, sure, what is it? And he's like, well, it's Asterix and the Power of the Gods, I think it was. No, Asterix and the Great Rescue. Yeah, Power of the Gods came the next year. So, yeah, so that was it. I had a job change overnight, and I was the in-house composer for core design for the next 6 years before I decided to leave. So,
And it's already
to,
so cool to start off with a franchise that you already know and love. Like, wow, what a blessed opportunity this is.
yeah, it was great, man. It was great. I couldn't have asked for a better job. And I was like 23 years old, so it was just like it wasn't like going to work. It was just like going to play. It's just going to
Yeah,
have fun. Making sounds and making tunes on this piece of software that I sort of hacked together. That I sort of,
I'm sure
you
many
know.
people will be jealous of that job. I mean myself, I'm like, man,
The
that's
thing
so
is,
awesome.
that job will never come around again because
No.
we had to actually design our own circuit board to make it work. We had the Yamaha sound chip that came out of the Mega Drive machine. We had that stuck on a board, and we had to route it. The output pins to a left and right phono socket. The power supply had to come. It was a PCI board which you plugged into a PC, and so it was like the Mega Drive sound system, but in a PC. And then we could develop all the software on it and listen to it on the PC. And then when we got it all working, and then we crunched it all down into machine code and stuff, and then we'd like port that over to the Mega Drive, and hey presto, ding, off it went. It did exactly what we were doing on the PC. So we had
Yeah.
like a PC board manufacturer. We had to get in touch with them and say, look, can you design us this board? Can we build it like this? Can we have this? Can we have that? And yeah, it took us months of work, but within 4 months we had it fully working. Me and another guy called Sean. It was brilliant. He did all the machine code, and I did all the C++ user interface stuff. It was great fun. Just great fun.
It's amazing. I mean, when I think about C++, I'm like, oh, headache. It's really difficult. So it's just not for me. But I mean, for some guys like you, it's really amazing.
Well,
So tell me,
yeah, go on.
yeah, when you first started writing the Tomb Raider theme, um, did you think, oh, this is a smash hit, I'm going to become famous? Did you ever think of anything like that?
No, no. You know, I think I'd already. I mean, we were doing so many games at this point. We were doing at least a game every month because there was another guy, Martin, who was doing he was the other composer and sound designer at Core, and we were doing a game each every month, and so it was like. So that was like in 1993. Then 94, the first CD console, the Mega CD came out. And suddenly it was like a proper game changer for us. Because firstly, the music trackers were gone. And now it was like professional DAW software, Cubase, Pro Tools, stuff like that. It was like, fucking hell. And suddenly we had to be as good as the music bands that were in the charts or the orchestras that were playing. Suddenly, like literally overnight, we had to sound as good as that. And it was like, bloody hell. We really had to kind of step up our game. And so I brought in a load of my kit from home, all the keyboards that I had, mixing desks, proper studio speakers, stuff like this. And Martin did the same. And, we had to suddenly not just be composers, but be producers as well. And, the sound quality was really, really important. It was like, before it was like, well, it doesn't matter, whatever the Yamaha chip can do, that's all it can do. So you didn't have to worry about sort of audio fidelity. It was like, well, it's just a shitty little chip. That's all it can do. It can't do any better than that. So, but now that when the CDs were there, it was like, we had to be as good as everyone in the charts, and yeah, so that was a really sort of big learning curve. And then I remember one of the producers came down one day and he said, Nathan, we're doing a game called Soul Star, and we need some music for it. And I'm like, okay. And he said, yeah, we want it to sound a bit like John Williams' Star Wars music. Like, hey, so I've just been doing Yamaha chip music. And my
Yeah.
next project is I've got to sound like John Williams' Star Wars, the London Symphony Orchestra or whatever,
Yeah, yeah.
Skywalker Orchestra or whatever. I can't remember which one it was. And it was like, well, how am I supposed to compete with that? I've got these two keyboards in my room, and it's like, okay, well, I've got to start somewhere. So, I just started listening, firstly, obviously, to the Star Wars music, which I already knew anyway. But I started listening to lots of other stuff, music from Aliens and this sort of thing. Just the sort of films that were out at that time, really. And then I just started to replicate that sound as best I could using synthesized bassoons and timpani and strings and this, and just bit by bit build it up. And where there was a shortfall with the synthesizers, you had to sort of manufacture your own orchestral sound somehow. So, instead of, if I didn't have any really good trumpets, well, I had to manufacture some sort of sawtooth synth sound that if I laid it with something else, with some horns, it sounded a bit like a trumpet, So you sort of fudge it, right? And gradually, once you got this sort of ensemble together, it's like, oh, actually, that doesn't sound too bad. It's not far off an orchestra, right? But there was no sample libraries. We weren't using anything like this. This was all synthesized, generated sounds. So Soulstar, we did that. And then I did Swagman. That was in 1996. I think in 1995 I did, there was an electronic game, electronic music, Blam Machine Head. Then I did Swagman, which was more orchestral. And that kind of gave me a bit of practice to sort of get that orchestral sound going again. And then a few months later, Tomb Raider was ready for me to work on. And, I talked to Toby about that, and we agreed we should try and make some sort of English classical music. We thought that would describe Lara Croft the best.
What is English classical music?
Exactly.
Who knows?
Something that came out of my head.
It's interesting that you mentioned Star Wars because composer, obviously younger composers, but composer to composer that I speak with, and even myself, we draw heavily on Star Wars and the orchestration. People clamor
A lot of people do.
on the scores and not
But
not the commercially available stuff, but the original handwritten scores, and that's extremely hard to come by. And you get somewhere, someone has a score somewhere, 100 pages PDF, and you devour that thing and listen and like, wow, what did John Williams do here? And it's composer after composer. I don't think people realize what a huge influence Star Wars had on the soundtrack industry.
Yeah, but he also took his influences from somebody else. You can hear a lot of the Holst Planet Suites in Star Wars. And then, of course, Holst took his influences from somebody else, and there's bits of Stravinsky in
Wagner,
Holst.
yeah.
Yeah, Wagner, and so, I think that's just how composers work. Whatever you listen to, you draw from that, and little ingredients of that come through in your own writing. I don't think you can help that happening. We're always trying to look for something new, or at least I am. That's what I strive to do. I strive to sort of write something that I haven't heard before.
Yeah.
If it sounds too much like something I've already heard, I'll often scrap it, or I'll change it drastically so that it doesn't sound like that thing that I thought it did. Because it bugs me if I've written something that, it sounds just like Coldplay, or it sounds just like that track, like, because then I feel like I've betrayed myself. I feel like I've copied something. And I think I'm better than that. I don't need to copy, but I think you can't help but be influenced by what you listen to. So it's a case of sort of, like I say, using the ingredients that you've heard to create a new dish.
It's so important that you mention this because, especially today's sound libraries, you get a sound library that has some patterns. You press a C, it plays the pattern, whatever. You just put
Yeah.
in 1 hour, 2 hours, you put a whole track together, and it sounds like Hans Zimmer. It sounds like
Yeah.
everyone else.
Yeah, exactly,
And
exactly.
it works
And
great for film music. It works great for television. But
yeah, if
for
you're under pressure and you've got to write something really quick, you've got to
yeah,
write a lot
yeah,
of music really quickly. Sure, those tools are really useful, but you're right. You just end up sounding like everybody else because that's what they're all. That's what all the sort of commercial writers are doing. When they've got to
but
do a
now at the
TV
end
show.
of the day, everyone sounds the same, and
Mhm.
I think it makes it
Can
also
do.
difficult to get a job because you're just as good as the next person, and
Yeah,
if you're
and also, producers will say to you, "I want something like this. You know what he did? I want it to sound like that."
yeah, yeah,
And I don't like doing that. When somebody asks me that, I'm
exactly,
just like, no, I don't want this job. I don't want to sound like somebody else.
yeah,
I want to. If you hire me because you like what I write. You like the way I write. You don't hire me to write like somebody else. If you do that, go and hire him. What are you bothering with me? Because I'm not going to do exactly what he does as good.
yeah,
He's the
yeah,
man
yeah.
for that. If you want that, get him.
But I think many game developers don't. I mean, they're not musicians. They don't know what they're looking for. So they
No.
come with you. They're like, "Oh, I want something that sounds like this," and you give it to them what you think. It's good and original, and then you put in so much work, and then say, I
Yeah, but
really
it
don't
doesn't
like
sound right.
this.
Yeah, I know.
And it goes to the side somewhere, and you somewhere upload it to the cloud, to the internet, and sacrifice it to the gods.
I know. And it's like, well, if they do know what they want, then why don't they just license it? Why don't they just buy something that's on the shelf that's already done, and then just
Yeah,
pick exactly what they want, just pay for it, because it costs more to create something from scratch than it does to buy some licensed music, particularly if it's just run of the mill stuff. Fine,
exactly. Yeah.
if you want to license a Beatles track, yeah, okay, you're going to pay for it, but generally speaking, mood music. There's tons of it out there on library shelves, and it's not expensive. I know because I've licensed stuff for other games.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So tell me, Peter, what was your life as a composer like after Tomb Raider?
Peter or Nathan?
Oh, Nathan, who am I talking to? I want to interview both of you. Maybe we should do it once together.
No.
Pardonnez-moi. Nathan, I'm really enjoying this interview so much. I'm zoning out here. Nathan, what was your life as a composer like after Tomb Raider?
Well, quite interesting, really. I left Tomb Raider because I was bored of it, and I wanted to do something else. And at that point in my career at Core Design, I was just Tomb Raider boy. They weren't giving me anything else. Jeremy wasn't giving me any other projects. I was just Tomb Raider. And because we were doing a Tomb Raider game each year, well, I had nothing to do for 6 months while they were designing, building stuff, working on the script. It was like, well, there was nothing for me to go on. And so, I was sat there twiddling my thumbs, going to work, and I couldn't see the point in it. And so I started saying to Jeremy, look, why don't you make me freelance? Why don't I go freelance for you? And then I can go and do some other stuff during this 6 months while we're waiting for the designers to get everything together. And then I'll think, no. He didn't want me to go. He wouldn't let me go. So that frustrated me. So I just I started turning up late to work because there was no point me being there.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And so he didn't like that. And then, so we had a bit of a sort of falling out about that. And then I said, well, then I'm just going to come and I'm going to write my own stuff. And then he didn't like that. And he said, well, if you write anything while you're here, we own it. And I thought, fucking hell, well, I didn't want that either. So then I started sort of trying to get other things off the ground. I had a phone call from Decca Records. They wanted to release the Tomb Raider soundtrack. So I thought, well, this is great. This is a project I can do in between the games, No, he didn't want to do that either. I'm like, are you joking? This is Decca Records, like the orchestral record label of the UK, and you don't want to release the soundtrack for Tomb Raider with them. You know, if you don't want to release it with them, who do you want to release it with? Because there isn't anybody else better in the UK.
Sorry to interrupt. I think this is again the thing of programmers or whatever people working in a field not knowing what the specialities are of musicians and not listening to the employees.
Yeah, and not knowing what they're sat on. They're sat onto on these copyrights, and they don't know how to exploit it. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to make money. So, it got to the point. We did Tomb Raider 2, okay, and then Tomb Raider 3. I was in the same situation, and the situation got worse with me and Jeremy. To the point when we had a bit of a falling out in his office, and I said, right, that's it, I'm getting out, I'm leaving. And he said, you can't leave, you got Tomb Raider 3 to do. And I said, well, I don't care, you can sort it out. And he said, come on to my office and we'll talk about freelance. I'm like, okay, let's do that then. So we discussed it, and he agreed that he would let me do it as a freelance project, and I would do it out of house. So that's what I did. So I'd actually already started work on it. I'd already written the theme tune. And then I left and carried on the project from my home studio. And during that time, we'll come back to this later, I think, in your questions. Because, I have seen your questions because you sent me them earlier. So we'll come back to this. Yeah. But your question now was, what was my life like after Tomb Raider? So I did Tomb Raider as a freelance project, and then I decided to turn my back on games and try some other things. So I wanted to get into the music industry a bit. I wanted to get into film and TV. That's really where I was trying to go. And I had some interesting little journeys along the way. I got a call from Lloyd Levin at Universal Studios in Hollywood, asking me if I was interested in doing the score for the Tomb Raider movie that was coming up. And I was like, of course, So I got on a plane and I went over there and met up with Lloyd Levin, and we talked about the movie and my involvement in it. And he said, well, look, I need to get a director first. So he said, go back to England. I'll give you a call when we get a director. You can meet up, and then we can go forward from there. Brilliant. And I thought, well, this is it. This is my ticket into Hollywood. Here we go. And I got the call, and I went to meet the director, Simon West, at Pinewood Studios in London. And they were in the middle of filming Tomb Raider. Daniel Craig was there, rocking about on some set that looked like a tomb. It was great.
Did you get to meet Angelina Jolie?
She wasn't there that day, apparently. She'd flown home for some reason. I don't know. But, I saw it all being made, all the cameras and stuff. I mean, it was, a really, really great experience. But he didn't seem to have much time for me, Mr. West. He came and I met him at some point, and we talked very briefly about the music, and he said, well, go away and write us something and send it in. Okay. So I did. I sent it in, and then I just heard nothing. Weeks went by, and eventually I called his PA again, and, has he listened to the music yet? I don't know. I sent it in weeks ago. Did you get it? Did he give it to you? Yeah, I gave it to him, Has he listened to it? I don't know. And then, as it turned out, I just had my first kid at the time, and I had a babysitter who used to come round, when my wife and I wanted to go out. And I found out she was babysitting Simon West's children as well.
Oh.
And I was like, you're joking me. And he lived in the village just like 3 miles from where I live. So I'm like, no way, man.
Wow.
What's the coincidence of this, So I said, well, can you do me a really big favour? Next time you're babysitting his kids, can you just ask him did he get the music that I sent in? Because I'm trying to get through with his PA and I'm just getting no's all the way. Yeah, okay, she'll ask him. And then she came to babysit for me a few weeks later. I said, did he see Simon? Yeah, I did. And I said, did he get my music? She said, no, he said he never got it. Fucking right. So I got on the phone to Lloyd Levin again. I'm like, look, mate, what's going on? You know, I'm sending this music in. I've done everything you asked me to do. Apparently he didn't even get it. I sent it to his PA. You know what? That's it. Yeah, unfortunately, Nathan, it's a bit late in the day now to kind of change the music. He's already picked somebody else. Great. So that was it. Job over. And I found out later on that the guy that did the music, I think it was Graham Revel, was Simon West's mate from school.
Yeah.
That was it. That was his credentials for writing the Tomb Raider movie, because he was my mate. And what did he do? He scored a load of dance music to Tomb Raider. It's
strange.
Like, what?
I really love that movie, but there's such strange musicals. I'm like, what?
Just beyond me.
Lost opportunity.
The whole thing was just crazy. The whole thing. Yeah. And so I just thought, you know what? It really fucking put me off, that did.
So I thought I've heard it all, but like, man, this is mind-blowing. I mean,
right,
I'm learning things about the Tomb Raider music that I never knew. Like, wow, fascinating.
I think a lot of people don't know this story, actually.
It's just how the industry works, you know.
Yeah, mate, exactly. It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah,
every step of the way. So, you know, after that, I wrote some music for the Spice Girls. They contacted me because they really liked the music for Tomb Raider. Great, yeah, and they wanted to use 2 tracks from Tomb Raider. And I'm like, well, hang on a minute. How about I write you something new, especially for the Spice Girls, that sounds like Tomb Raider, but it has the Spice Girls tune in it. And they were like, ooh, that sounds good. And I'm like, yes, that's a good result, because then it means I own it. Because, of course, Tomb Raider is owned by Core Design and Eidos, and I wouldn't have seen a penny if they'd used that. I didn't own it. So I wrote them something special, and, of course, they loved it. And I got, you know, VIP seat tickets to their show at Earls Court Stadium in London. There was 22,000 people, mostly girls there. And young girls, I should say, you know.
Yeah.
Kids, mostly. And, you know, front row seat. And after show, passed to the VIP lounge. Met 2 of the Spice Girls there. Yeah, that was great. That was a really good buzz, that was. That was a really great gig, you know, because my tune opened the show. And, you know, as soon as it started playing, 22,000 people just leapt up out of their seats to my tune. I was like, fuck, you know, this is just amazing, you know.
Yeah.
It just blew me away. Probably one of the best moments of my career. Such a good buzz, that. And that kind of got me really sort of, yeah, I want a bit more of this, you know. I want to do this again. So I just sort of kept on going, really. I just sort of kept sort of meeting people and trying to get on something else that was big. But it didn't really happen. I spent another 8 years freelance, just doing crap job after crap job, you know, just for bread money, really struggling for a long time. Didn't really get another break that was any significant, or that made any sort of significant impact to my career. And then in about 2001, I thought, you know, I'm going to have to go back to games. So I'd been out from 1998 to 2001, struggled for those sort of 3 years. Now, I just needed some money. So I then did Battle Engine and Killer for Lost Toys. That was another sort of orchestral project. Got a bit of money from that, so that sort of got me on my feet again. And then a few more games, but not really big projects, nothing like Tomb Raider, nowhere near, nothing like that. And after struggling along, I got to about, when was it, 2008. And I just had enough of working my arse off, day and night and weekends, never a bloody break, hardly getting paid, always having to do work for free just to get a credit. I just thought, you know what, fuck it, I've had enough of this. So I went back, full-time employment, got a job as senior audio designer at Zoe Mode in Brighton. And I worked for them for 2 years, progressed up to audio manager. And then I got this job at Vatra in Brno in the Czech Republic. It was a contract to begin with, but I landed an audio director position there. And here I am, still in the Czech Republic. I stayed with Vatra for, I think, 2 years. No, 2 years, 2010 to 2012. Then they went down, they went bust, 50, well, they got thrown away actually by the parent company, Kuju. So 50% of us got laid off, me included. So I then did a contract work again. I got a contract for City Interactive in Warsaw in Poland. I worked there for 6 months. Did what was it called? Ghost. I can't remember the name of it now. Anyway, it was a sniper game. Sniper Ghost 3.
Ghost Recall, I think.
Sniper Ghost 3 or something. Ghost Sniper 3, something like that. Anyway.
Yeah.
So I did that and another game with them, Alien Rage. But then fell out with them. They gave me the title but no authority. So I was their audio director, but they didn't let me do anything. They just basically had me being a sound designer. And so I was like, do you know what, I've had enough of this as well. Bollocks, I'm going freelance again. So I went back to Brno. I drove to England. I got all my stuff, which had been in a storage facility there. I drove it back to Brno. I set it up. And I just started freelancing from the Czech Republic, but to English and American clients. And mostly through people that I'd known from working all those years. And bit by bit, I got some fairly good projects in. Did lots of sort of small indie games were coming in, loads of apps, because that was a time when all that was happening, and so games were like really small again. It's like you could do a whole game in about 2 weeks. So this was great. I could do all the music and the sound effects in 2 weeks. I'm like, cool. And you get paid quite a chunk of cash for that. So it was actually quite good money, because I could get these projects from these guys that I knew, and they were just repeat clients, man. So they were just feeding me work, so the money started coming in again, so that was great. And then Tomb Raider Suite, I started that in 2014, and that sort of takes you up to the present day. I've been doing the Tomb Raider Suite now since then, so almost 10 years. And I've done a few other games along the way, more bigger games now, and I'm currently working on three different projects. I'm composer for one, audio director for the other two, and hands-on audio director. So I'm music and sound effects. So I'm busy.
I think of composer myself. Often when people look into your Wikipedia page or your biography, they say, oh, you did this work, and then, oh, you didn't score this big. Oh, what happened to this person? But not knowing that that person actually really tried. The market is difficult. The job, it's really who you know. It's it's really difficult in the audio industry, and people, like I said, from the outside, don't know the difficulties of getting a job, having an agent. Do you think it's useful to have an agent or working through an agency?
if you haven't worked in the industry, you definitely need to be with an agency. There is no way you'll find work cold calling people. I've tried it loads, and it's so difficult, so difficult. You spend hours and hours and hours going to shows, going to all the dev cons and all of that. These big things, walking around, meeting all the big wigs, taking a business card, calling them a week later, calling them a month later, calling them 3 months later, and there's loads of them to follow up because you collect everyone's bloody business card. I mean, it's a ton of work. Literally 6 months chasing people, no after no after no. Okay, and then and like with the Tomb Raider movie thing, you find out they've just hired their best mate.
Yeah.
And they're just giving you their business card just to make you go away.
I think when it comes to
it's soul destroying.
When it comes to indie games, these kind of things can be useful when there's a smaller team, but also a smaller budget / and or no budget. And at the end of the day, your income you might work for hours and hours and hours and make a few $100, if even so much. Like, man,
I know this is the catch. Unfortunately, you as a composer want to do the best job because it's your advert to your next job. Well, I did this, and someone goes, "Oh, I like that," But if they're only paying you a few £100, it's like you've got no motivation to do a good job. At least I don't. If the money's good, I work bloody hard. If the money's not, it's really hard to put in the motivation. And the thing is, you can't afford to put in the time when the money's bad. You have to make a living. You got to pay your bills. And so it's like, well, I can't afford to spend 10 weeks on something when I'm getting paid for 1 week. I cannot do it, right? But that's what you've got to do if you want to get your next job. So it's like, well, how do you do that?
Yeah, right.
And so you have to find ways of shortcutting the work. And there are ways of doing it, writing music. For instance, a simple example so that everyone would understand is I could write a full orchestral score for something with like 50 instruments, or I could write a minimal piece of music that's just a few chords on the piano, right? And it might have the same effect. One of them takes half an hour to write, the other one takes 3 days to write.
Yep.
Well, if I'm getting paid £200, I'm choosing the one that's going to take half an hour to write. And this is what you learn, unfortunately, the hard way. When the money's low, you take your shortcuts because you cannot afford to write an epic score for hardly any money. If you do that, you'll go bankrupt. And I'll tell you what, to be honest, I've been nearly bankrupt 3 times in my life because I've worked so hard at something for so little money. And it doesn't work.
I know. I've
learned. I decided the second time I went freelance. I decided I'm never gonna work on a weekend again, ever. And you know what? I've stuck to that. And am I better off? The answer is yes. I earn more money now than I did when I was working 7 days a week. Go figure.
I think that's part of the thing that comes with experience. In the beginning, you're just trying to perform and show how good you are. You might be, but later you realize you're putting in everything, and people have to value you for the experience that you actually have. So
you got to learn better ways of working. This is the thing, and that just comes through experience.
Exactly.
It's not easy, and often guys ask me, how do I get into the industry, as a new writer, and it's like, do you know what? It's really, really difficult. I'm glad I don't have to do that. I'm glad I know people now that I can, when I need some work, I just call all my friends basically and say, hey guys, what are you doing at the minute? Have you got anything you can bung my way? Oh yeah, all right, mate. Yeah, actually we have. and they'll take me straight away because they know me. And everyone would rather work with somebody they know than somebody they don't know. And this is why it's difficult for the new guys coming into the industry, because they don't know them.
Reference
And they know
Tomb
they
Raider
always
movie.
know somebody else. They always know somebody else. Yeah, the Tomb Raider movie.
Yeah.
Classic example. Classic example.
I wrote I wanted to tell you, I wrote a demo track for a developer, and they were doing a demo for government funding, and it was a really big project, and they gave me the description of what they want, and I wrote this amazing short little demo track. It took me maybe a day, but it is really, really well done. It's really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And they listened to it, and the director told me, this isn't quite what we want. I was like, oh no. So from the very beginning, you should have told me exactly what you want. But his descriptions was very vague because they didn't know exactly what they want. So you put in all this work, and then they tell you, no, this is not quite what we want. Like, oh well.
Yeah, I think
it goes down the drain.
This is one of the hardest thing, I think, about being a composer, is that the person that's asking you to compose doesn't know anything about music or cannot describe what's in his head because he's not musical. And the task, the difficult task for a composer, is to try and work out what he's hearing in his head. What he's what is he hearing? Is it this? Does it sound like this? What is it like this? And you have to sort of feed them examples. Do you want it a bit more like? Do you want something faster like this, or slower, more love, or more sadness? And the more you can sort of feed them with these goalposts, the more you can narrow in on what it is they're looking for, and then hopefully you can get pretty close to what they were hearing in their head first time. If you can get there first time, you've saved yourself a lot of work. If it takes you 2 or 3 goes, it's like, can't do this for every track in the game, because then that's 3 times the work, and you haven't got the money for that.
That's golden advice for composers, yeah.
That's the key. Narrow in on that style as fast as you can. I often say to clients, it usually takes me 2 or 3 tracks to really settle into the style for the game. And then the tracks just roll out. I can write a track in half a day. Like a whole track done, 3 minutes. But to begin with, that first track, it can take me a week. Sometimes a week and a half, fiddling around, not really happy. Got to get haven't got the tune for the melody or the instrument for the melody. Haven't got the textures right. Once you've established all of that and you've got your palette, then it's just like, okay, well, change the speed, change the key, minor or major, but you've got your sort of building blocks. And then it's easy. Then it starts to roll off like a production line, and you can get tunes written really fast.
And because you know what you want, and they know what they want, and it goes too well together.
You got to try and marry the two. But it's different with every client. Some clients, they know exactly what they want, and they know exactly how to tell you it. Great, I love those people. Because I don't have to mess around so much trying to find out what it is that they want, because they can talk my language, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they go, we need some music for the game, and I go, okay, right, what do you want? They go, well, we go, no. And you're like, okay, well, do you want to tell me what you want for the game, or do you want me to tell you what I think you need for the game? And I'm like, probably better if you tell us. I'm like, okay, fine. Okay, so I'll do that. And I'm okay with that. Right, I'll write this. And I put it in, and they go, okay, it's good. And sometimes I say, are you happy? Is everything okay? Is the music all right? And I'm like, well, I think it's okay. Yeah. And I will say that because I do think it's okay. That's the first thing. I genuinely believe it is. Otherwise, I wouldn't write it. But also, I don't want to give them the opportunity of saying, oh, well, can we just change it a bit? Because A, they don't know what to change it to. They can't tell me what to change it to because they don't know how to speak music. And what happens is you end up with a merry-go-round. Oh, can we change a bit faster? Can we try it a bit slower? A bit sort of more this, a bit more that. And you end up going full circle. And I've tested this. You go back to the original piece that you gave them a month ago and they go, that's it. That's what we want. And it's like, yeah, bastards.
I know.
I've just spent a month
I've
fucking
had
about
that.
with that, you know.
Yeah, and you waste your own time. You lose money. They
And
lose
you
money.
fucking loads of money. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's like it's costing a fortune. So, you know, it's really important that you get on the same page with them as quickly as possible for both of you.
But I also feel that as a game director, you should have a vision of what your game is. You can't just leave it up to the composer. You should know what you want. And if you don't know, do some research, watch movies, play games, tell them exactly what you want, and don't waste their time, don't waste your time. It makes everyone miserable.
I agree. In a ideal world, that would be how it works. But you know, some producers come to me and it's just last minute. They're rushed. They've been put on the project last minute to rescue something, some new IP. They're not musical. They've no idea. We've got 2 months. They've got to get the whole audio put in the game. That's like, Nathan, I've no idea, mate. Just do whatever you think is right. And so off you go. You just write it, and you write it as fast as you can because you've got 2 months to get it all in there. And not just the music, but the sound as well. And it's like, fucking hell, this is a nightmare. You know, you just got to go at it like a bat out of hell, you know.
Speaking of...
every shortcut you can think of.
I remember at university, there was a clarinet player who asked me to accompany their clarinet exam. I think it's like the third year or final year. This person didn't think about getting an accompanist right up to a week before the exam. And I think this was like maybe 4 days before the exam. And they were playing concerto piece of some modern I can't remember, some modern composer. It was frightfully difficult. I mean, I'm a fine player, but I'm not a brilliant sight reader in like people that sight read professionally. I was a student. I mean, I can sight read well, but not especially when it comes to modern concertos, and it's also technical difficulties. I'm like, why did you get an accompanist 4 days before the exam?
Exactly.
Eventually, I had to bring in another.
Yeah.
I had to bring in another person to help out with this because, like, it's like a 30-minute program. Like, you're doing it 4 days before the exam. You're freaking out. They're like, "What? I'm trying to help you, but you're asking me the impossible."
Yeah.
Tell me, Nathan, do you ever write music for yourself, just like outside of games?
Yeah, you know, I've always been doing that. From, you know, when I was 13, as I mentioned. And then, you know, when I get a chance, I do. I haven't actually written any for myself for quite a few years because I've just been so busy, particularly with the Tomb Raider suite. But, you know, maybe the Tomb Raider suite was a bit for me because the Tomb Raider suite was very much a sort of 50% extension of all of those pieces.
How did it come together, the Tomb Raider suite? How did you decide on doing that?
Well, you know, when I first got that call from Decca Records, that's what sort of put the idea in my head, is just to release a soundtrack. And I kept asking IDOS and then Square Enix, you know, can we release a soundtrack? No, they didn't want to do it. It's like, fucking hell. For 10 years this went on. I kept asking them. And then eventually I got together with my now business partner and we decided on this plan. We would have a sort of 3-pronged attack. We'd have the recorded album in a studio with a live orchestra. We'd do a live concert and we'd make a documentary about it all, a TV documentary. And we took that business plan to Square Enix, and they were like, "Oh yeah, this sounds good." So I was like, "Okay, right." So then I looked at all the material from Tomb Raiders 1, 2, and 3, and of course Tomb Raider 1 has got about 20 minutes of music in it, and that's it. I was like, I can't. This isn't enough. You know, Tomb Raider 2 has got a little bit more, probably about 35 minutes, and then Tomb Raider 3 was, I don't know, close to about 60 minutes, I think. So it's like, well, I need to ramp up Tomb Raider 1 somehow. I need to make it at least as big in length as 2 and 3. I don't need the full 60 minutes from 3, so I can sort of pull that back a bit. 2 needs to go up a bit, and 1 needs to go up quite a lot, so that they're sort of evenly balanced. Same number of tracks kind of thing. And so, of course, I looked at the music for Tomb Raider, and the cues were quite short. I mean, some of them were only like 30 seconds long. It's like, well, you can't really have a standalone piece of music that lasts for 30 seconds. It's not long enough to tell a story, you know. Once upon a time, there was the end. Oh, you know what I mean? That's no good. You know, where's the middle?
Yeah,
So I thought, right, well, I've got to extend these pieces somehow. And I've got to extend them so that they sound like it was always there. So I've got to write it in the style I wrote from 20 years ago. I've got to sort of pretend I'm back there. And so that's really kind of how it came about. And so although the material was grounded in Tomb Raider, all the new material, like I say, it was at least 50% of it, was just me imagining more stuff in the sort of Tomb Raider style, as I would have written 20 years ago. So I had to be careful not to overcomplicate it and this sort of thing, and not make it too, you know, I didn't want to sort of change it too much. It had to sort of remain in that sort of realm. So
I'm so glad you did it, because so many fans really enjoyed. I mean, even for myself, really enjoyed the Tomb Raider suite, and you did a fantastic job on that.
I like the suite now. Thank you. You know, I like the suite. I like listening to it now because there's new bits in it, and for me, it's like, oh, great. You know, it's kind of, yeah, it's got sort of new fascination in there for me. You know, because I've heard the original stuff so many times now. So I actually was a bit worried when I started the project. I thought I was going to be unmotivated by it or demotivated by it.
Yeah.
Because I thought, you know, when you revisit tunes from the past, I don't know whether you've done this before, but it's like, oh God, I can do much better than that. This is boring.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to be like that. But when I got into it and I started writing the new material, that sparked the new interest, and so my motivation came in, and it was, oh, this is great, you know. And now when I listen to it, it's lovely. I'm really pleased with some of the stuff in there, you know. And I am pleased with how it's ended up.
What I think is actually this initiative of yours really laid the foundation for the Tomb Raider reboot. I don't think that would have been conceptualized without you. But did you play the rebooted game?
No. You mean the 2013?
The remaster, the remaster 1 to 3
remasters. The remasters.
Remaster.
Aha. Yeah.
Reboot remaster.
No, I haven't played the remastered ones. Yeah, like kids in the background. Hopefully that nobody's bothered about that.
Heaven bless them.
Yeah, no, I haven't played it. There is a. I have to be careful what I say, because I'm still kind of under contract with some of this stuff.
Yeah, of course.
And there are non-disclosure clauses in my contract, so I'm not allowed to say stuff. But I was going to release the actual original Tomb Raider soundtracks, unchanged, unextended. And that would have included the music from the full motion video sequences without the sound effects and voiceovers. Okay, and I started doing it. I started making it, and I did all the tunes for Tomb Raider 1. Everything was like remastered, renewed, and that was in my contract that I could do that. And then eventually Square Enix, when I said to them, okay, we're ready to release this now, we're gonna push forward on this, I just want to check the artwork with you, because everything had to be greenlit by Crystal Dynamics. They didn't let me move forward. And then 6 months later, out came the remastered games with the remastered soundtracks of 1, 2, and 3. Now, I haven't listened to those yet, so I don't know. I don't know what tracks are on there, but
I've played it. I really enjoyed what they did. I really enjoyed the remasters.
I'm sure the games are great. I'm sure the game. I mean, from what I've seen, they look fantastic, and by I would guess all the music cues are like the original, because a remaster.
But man, I would really love them to have used the music for the Tomb Raider suite. That would have been so awesome. It would have been a really awesome addition to the. I mean, it's a creative choice, but
it would have need designing from a musical standpoint, because the tunes for the Tomb Raider suite are much longer. They're all at least 3 minutes long, and that's not so useful in gameplay terms. You know, you don't need a piece of music that's 3 minutes long. You actually need something that's just 20 seconds or 10 seconds.
Missed opportunities. They should have gone back to you and got the what it is.
I
But
agree.
maybe there's a fan or a modder out there, heaven pray, that's listening to this and is going to take your Tomb Raider suite and make a mod for it and put it into the game. Please do it.
Well, they're not allowed to do that without asking me. That's the first thing, because
please contact Nathan.
Suite,
Yeah,
right?
Please contact Nathan and let's do
so
this.
That's the first thing. But you know, I didn't write the Tomb Raider suite to be in a game. I wrote the Tomb Raider suite to be a standalone orchestral piece of music that could be performed with a live orchestra. That's what I wrote, because I wanted to go on stage with it with a live orchestra, and we did that. And we're still doing that. We're still doing concerts and putting things on, talking to people about that. So it was never designed to go in a game, the Tomb Raider suite. But I do think they should have come to me for the remastered versions, because I am the only one that has the original MIDI files that you can generate properly remastered, and re-recorded versions of the soundtrack. Crystal Dynamics doesn't have that information. Core Design never had that information. I took it with me. In fact, I didn't even have the original MIDI files for Tomb Raider 1. I even lost those. I only had Tomb Raider 2 and Tomb Raider 3. I had to reconstruct Tomb Raider 1 from scratch. And I've done all of that now. And it would have... I just don't get it. I just don't get it. They decided to do it, and they decided to stop me releasing the soundtracks. I guess they just want all the money. You know,
missed
fine,
opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, if they want to do that, that's fine. That's their call.
Well,
you know,
at least, I mean, I really enjoyed the games. That at least it didn't turn out like the GTA remasters.
But they released the soundtracks as well, though, didn't they? With that remastered.
I don't think so. No.
I'm sure there was they said there was a digital download of the soundtrack.
Maybe Steam. I'm not sure. I didn't.
I haven't bought it.
No, I'm not sure. I didn't.
But
I
I should really, just to listen to it, just to see what they've done.
This is the problem in the industry. I'm sure all composers are struggling with. When I did my master's degree, I wanted to analyze some soundtracks, and sometimes it's impossible to get hold of the soundtracks. It's not available anywhere.
You can't
Publishers don't care about the fans, about the money that's coming in from that. They just
It's
throw
just
it away.
crazy, and they're sat on the copyrights because they always make the bloody composers sign it all away, which actually I don't do anymore. I've learned my lesson from that a long time ago, and now I hang on to my rights. But I didn't with many of my past games, and the publishers just sit on the rights and they don't do anything with them, nothing, and it's wrong. It really
Yeah, it
is
is.
wrong. They shouldn't do that, and I've been advising younger composers now on contractual clauses to put in their contracts to retain the rights, and it can be done, and you shouldn't accept the bullshit from publishers. Oh no, we need to own everything. Stop, lock, stock, and barrel. Bollocks.
Yeah,
They
yeah, yeah.
do not. They do not. You can give them a license to do whatever they want to do with the music connected to the game, and you can keep the rights. You can keep the music copyrights, and you can. Well, there's lots of things you can keep, and so I help young guys, keep all of their rights because what the publishers try and do, they just try and make it easy for themselves, and
Yeah,
they
yeah, yeah.
pull the wool over these young lads that come into the industry that don't know music copyright law, and it's not fair, it's not right.
I think many gamers only think of the game and they've got the association with the game. But as a composer, you wrote beautiful music. And for me,
Right.
as a composer who appreciate other people's music, I'm like, wow, I really want to get this music. And someone
Yeah,
recorded the game in the music and put it on YouTube. The quality isn't perfect. And like, they're difficult to.
I know, I know, I
It's
know.
just what it is, huh?
I know.
So
I mean,
speaking of,
it is changing. The industry is changing, but it has taken 20 years for that change to happen.
speaking of, there's this kind of fans, and I'm sure that a lot of fans have sent you like fan recordings or fan arrangements of the Tomb Raider theme. Have you
Yeah,
got quite a lot of that over the years?
yeah, yeah. Every now and again, someone sends another one in, and some of them are great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Some of them are not. Many of them are not. But every now and again, there's a good one. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
more
think
like that.
sometimes you have people that's maybe good composers, but they don't have good mixing skills or any mixing skills, or just
Yes,
record it on a
definitely.
piano somewhere. It's a great piano, really well played, but the mixing side's not good. So, what are some of the common audio mistakes that you hear in mixes from young composers or from amateur musicians?
So usually, the thing that's missing is expression. They get the notes right, they get the chords right, they put the right instrumentation in there, but it sounds like you're plonking down the stairs. Dun 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 dun. Right? Instead of
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's just no expression. And yeah, that's just missing. And so it doesn't say anything. If there's no expression is everything. Expression is where the feeling comes from. And if there's no expression, there's no feeling. It's just like blocks of concrete going by.
And that's something that you have to learn, especially if you work with digital audio workstations. You have to learn how to, make the music go slower and change the tempo. It's things you have to learn, especially
Yeah,
if
but
you're not in a, as a
yeah, but some
working as
guys
an audio
never get it.
specialist.
Some guys never get it. I know a good friend of mine. He writes some great music, lovely melodies, lovely harmonies and stuff. But he cannot. He cannot put any expression in his tunes at all, and his production skills are terrible. So it just sounds dreadful. But then I say to him, let me send me your MIDI files over, and he sends me them over, and then I edit it and make it dance and sing, and I send it back to him, and he goes, "Oh my God, how do you do that? What do you do?" Well, I spend a lot of time, with every single note, thinking about how hard it would be played, how it falls onto the next note. Is it a violin? Is it a clarinet? The clarinetist's got to breathe. String player doesn't have to breathe. You know, these little things, if you pay attention to them and put in the expression, then it starts to sing, then it starts to say something.
I've
You know,
actually had
I went to the point. It was actually in Tomb Raider I did this. In Where the Depths Unfold. It's that choir piece. Okay, and in that I thought that it was a synth choir. It was a pretty good sound, but I thought, well, how can I make it more real? I thought, well, let's put some breaths in. Let's make the choir breathe. So I literally went in front of the microphone. And I did this time and time again, about 8 or 10 times. Every point where I thought the choir should take a breath. And then I multi-tracked that, and I put the breaths in. Put a little bit of reverb on it, sat it back away from the listener. And now, all of a sudden, it sounded like a real choir. It's like, actually, that's pretty bloody good now, just from putting the breaths in.
Obviously,
So again,
because
just
if you
attention
if
to
you
detail. You know.
yeah, if you're working with if the choir is layered with the orchestra, you're not going to hear the breaths. But if it's
No.
solo choir and solo instruments,
Right.
you have to pay attention to these things.
Exactly.
I once met a composer who had fantastic feeling. Oh, he's played with such emotion. But it is the opposite problem when it comes to writing music and the melodies and the harmonies. It was quite terrible, but it was
Right.
expressions. Just quite the opposite feeling. So I mean, you get that as well. And this is one of the things. Again, as a musician, sometimes you have to be at the right place at the right time, and chance and luck plays. It's just part of life. You can be how good. There's fantastic musicians, but they just never
Yeah.
had the perfect competition, the perfect
Totally.
musician to play. It's just
Totally. I
happens.
mean, they say you get, one lucky break in your life. You get one big project that you get on in your life. You could say mine's Tomb Raider. You know, what other big projects have I had? Maybe that gig with the Spice Girls. You know, one track. You know, what else? Well, I've worked on over 70 games. You know, but if I told you what they were, nobody would have heard of them.
Yeah.
So it's like, so you see what I mean? It's like, and I've been in the games industry and working in the games industry for 30 years.
Nathan, if speaking of soundtracks, what are some of your favorite soundtracks, like from other composers that you can think of that you really like to listen to sometimes?
Yeah, so one of the ones which really always sticks out in my memory is Medal of Honor, Michael Giacchino. I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
He's gone on to be a Hollywood guy. He's done Ratatouille and The Incredibles and a lot of Pixar stuff. He's great. His score for Medal of Honor was just perfect.
It's actually one of my
Absolutely
favorites as well. I'm so surprised that you mentioned it because I really like that
Love it.
soundtrack too.
I've played that game from start to finish on every difficulty level many times, and I just love it. I love playing it. It's a brilliant game.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg, director as well. So some really good talent on that. So that's one. Another one which really sucked me in to play, and I couldn't leave it alone, was Homeworld. I think is it Sierra that made that.
I'm not sure.
I can't remember who the publisher was, but anyway, Homeworld, and there's Homeworld 2 as well, and they've just remastered Homeworld. That score. In fact, I didn't know the name of the guy until today. I looked him up. I'll just get his name so we can talk about him. Paul Ruskay.
Paul Ruskay.
Lovely score for that. It's just perfect. You really do feel like you're in space with that.
I know the game, but I've never heard of Paul Ruskay.
No, me neither.
And again, it's just the accidents of life, but it's a great soundtrack. So
Yeah,
all the best to him, and I
fantastic.
want to hear more of him, and make him
Yeah, yeah.
a public. If you ask gamers what composers do you like, oh, Jeremy Soule. I mean, I love Jeremy Soule, but
Right.
they can't mention anyone else. Thankfully, they mention Nathan McCree and Peter Connolly, but like most people don't know who it is, and so you have to
There's a
look these
couple of
things
other
up.
there's a couple of other game apps which I really like as well for the music. Oh shit! No, I've just forgotten it. Smash Hit is one. If you've never played that, that's great. Soundtrack to that is really,
I'll
really
have
good.
to look into that one.
And the other one is the it's the puzzle game. The my kids have got it. You'll have to edit this bit out while I think.
The Incredible Machine.
It's about the Monument Valley. There you go.
Oh, Monument Valley. Oh, yeah, that's amazing.
Brilliant.
Oh, and I
Brilliant.
love to play that game. Yeah, it's just good.
And it's not just the music, but it's the sound design as well, because the sound design is tuned into the music. It's like, oh, yeah, mate, you got that right. You got that right. Yeah, really lovely.
If this is going to be my concluding question, Nathan, if you could score any game of your choice that you really admire, what would you have liked to score?
That's difficult because I don't play many games these days because I'm an old man. No,
And a busy man and a father.
Yeah, I've got 3 kids here and 2 more kids in England, and I have a lot to do, and I hardly get time for myself. So I don't really know what games are out there half the time. I get a project, and if I like it, great. I decide I'm going to work on it, and if I don't like it or I don't like the people, although that rarely happens, I'll go and do something else. But there's a project I'm working on at the minute, which is under wraps, and it's lovely because it's sci-fi, it's futuristic, and so I'm really looking forward to doing the music for that. I love sci-fi stuff, so I suppose without sort of picking an individual game, I would just say a genre. Sci-fi is where I really like to go because I love synthesizers. I always have. I love synth sounds. I like mixing synths with orchestral sounds, but I also just love playing around with synth textures because there's so many ways you can go with it. It's like endless possibilities. With an orchestra, you've got strings, you've got brass, you've got woodwind, and then you got this and that, right? And there's a sort of this is what it is, and you sort of work inside that with those sounds, right?
Because
but
they
with,
work, yeah.
Yeah, but with electronic stuff, it's like whatever you want, any sound you want, and and it doesn't even have to be a musical sound. It can be machine sounds as well. I used to write techno music when I was younger, when I was in in my clubbing days. And and that's just mostly machine noises, but put together in some rhythmic fashion. And that stuff is just fascinating. Some of the techno writers out there are just used to blow my mind. It's like, Christ, listen to that, man. So inventive, so creative. Writing music without notes or harmony. It's like, what? It's like from the days of sort of, is it Stockhausen who first started that stuff, that sort of concrete music, I think they termed it, where it was just
I think so.
Music made with sounds rather than notes and harmonies. And techno is kind of like a sort of advanced form of that. And
John Cage.
Yeah.
John Cage for all I care.
sometimes it's just mind blowing. And sometimes it can be like frightening. The power of the sounds that they get and the sub bass and stuff is like bloody hell. It's absolutely frightening. So for me, sci-fi genres, they always catch my interest. And this particular game that I'm going to be working on start of next year is sci-fi. And yeah, so that should be good
Nathan,
fun.
all the best to that project. And
Thank you.
I'm actually looking forward to that because we've had such a really intimate but adventureful, insightful interview. It was fantastic to get to know you.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
for your
been good
time.
talking. I've enjoyed
And
it. Thanks
and
for the questions. They've
I'm
been interesting.
really excited to hear what's happening because I think regardless, irregardless, regardless whether this project is a massive feat or not, it will be a personal thing that you will really enjoy. And I'm looking forward to listening to the soundtrack and hearing Nathan coming through this music.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. The good thing is that I've learned how to retain my rights now. So I've got soundtracks now which I can start to release. And having done the Tomb Raider suite, I know the mechanics of how to get music out there now. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next 10 years. I think there's it'll be time when I can write more for myself and get more of the ideas out there that I've wanted to do for many years. So yeah,
We
I
should
ain't
do
finished
this.
yet.
We should do this again, I think. And next time we should talk about copyright and these contractual
Yeah.
clauses. So I think that should be
Why
our
not?
next discussion. That would be
Yeah,
fascinating.
why not? I think we might annoy a few publishers, but who cares?
Oh, they should get with the time. Nathan, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks.
Thanks very much for having me.
Okay, take care.
Okay, bye for now. Bye.